The timestamp was 11:51 p.m. Outside, a blizzard was burying Denver in white silence, but inside my apartment, the only thing I felt was the cold blue light of my phone. The text message from my mother Susan sat on the screen like a verdict. She wrote, "Your father and I agree. Until you fund Chloe's engagement party, don't bother coming to the Aspen Gala. You're ruining this family." I didn't even have time to process the cruelty before the second notification pinged. It was Instagram. My sister Chloe had posted a photo of the venue with a caption that felt like a knife to the ribs. "Finally got rid of the negative energy, blessed." I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of my laptop screen. I waited for the tears. I waited for the panic. But they didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange cold clarity. I didn't reply. I just opened my laptop. Before I tell you what I did next, I have a question. Have you ever been the person who pays the bills but gets treated like a stranger in your own home? Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from. I want to see who's standing with me tonight. My apartment was freezing. The central heating was set to 62 degrees to save money, a habit I had developed years ago to offset the cost of heating a 5-bedroom house in Aspen that I didn't live in. I pulled my blanket tighter around my shoulders, but my hands remained exposed, hovering over the keyboard. They weren't trembling. They were steady, like a surgeon preparing to make the first incision. I didn't start with a scream or a text back. I started with the cloud. I logged into the family's shared administrative dashboard. It was a digital map of my own exploitation, a web of passwords and autopay links I had built to keep their lives frictionless. The first target was Richard, my father. I clicked on the tab labeled Emergency Card. This was a credit line I had opened 3 years ago strictly for, as he put it, life or death situations. I pulled up the transaction history for the last 30 days. It was a scrolling list of liquor stores, cigar shops, and high-end steakhouses. Not a single hospital. Not a single pharmacy, just $1,000 of vice funded by my overtime hours. I didn't feel angry. I felt like an auditor discovering a rounding error. I moved my cursor to the card management tab. I selected Report Lost or Stolen. Then I selected Close Account Permanently. The screen asked me to confirm. I clicked Yes. Instantly, the digital card turned gray. Somewhere in Aspen, the plastic rectangle in his wallet became nothing more than a scrap of waste. Next was Chloe. I navigated to the automotive leasing portal. The pearl white luxury SUV she drove was technically mine. I had signed the lease because her credit score was non-existent and she had promised to make the payments. She had made exactly 0 payments in 14 months. I looked at the Make Payment button, which was due tomorrow. I moved my mouse to the lease termination options. There was an early termination fee, heavy and expensive, but compared to the cost of my dignity, it was a bargain. I selected Voluntary Surrender. I entered the pickup address, my parents' driveway. I scheduled the tow for Monday morning. The confirmation window popped up. "Are you sure you want to terminate this agreement?" I whispered the word yes to the empty room and clicked the button. Finally, the house itself. The winter gala was happening right now, powered by electricity I paid for, warmed by gas I subsidized, and broadcast over high-speed internet that billed to my debit card. I logged into the utility provider. I didn't turn off the power, that would be illegal, but I did something far more effective for the long term. I went to the billing section. I removed my primary checking account. I deleted my backup savings card. I unchecked the box that said paperless billing and switched the notification settings to mail only. Then I set the account to cash payment on delivery. The next time a bill arrived, it wouldn't vanish silently into my bank account. It would land in their mailbox, heavy and red and demanding. I sat back. The only light in the room was the sleep mode indicator on my laptop, blinking slowly like a heartbeat. The silence in my apartment usually felt lonely. Tonight it felt like a weapon. I had just severed the 3 main arteries of their lifestyle in less than 12 minutes. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind howling outside. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the storm. I was the storm. People always ask how you let it get this bad. They look at the numbers, $82,000 over 10 years, and they wonder if you were stupid or naive or just weak. But they don't understand the physics of normalized cruelty. You don't wake up one morning and decide to hand over your life savings to people who hate you. It happens by degrees. It is the boiling frog experiment played out in real time, with my bank account as the water. I sat in the dark thinking about the first time I felt the heat. It was 5 years ago. Richard, my father, needed emergency back surgery. He had no insurance because he didn't believe in giving money to scammers, as he put it. The bill was $25,000. I was 24 years old. I was driving a Honda Civic with a taped-up bumper and eating ramen 5 nights a week to build a safety net. When the bill came, they didn't ask me for the money. They just stared at me. My mother, Susan, cried at the kitchen table, looking at me with those wet, expectant eyes waiting for me to fix it. Richard sat in his recliner, groaning in pain, loudly wondering if he would end up in a wheelchair because some people were too selfish to help. I paid the bill. I wiped out my entire savings account in a single wire transfer. I thought I was buying his health. I thought I was buying their gratitude. But I wasn't buying anything. I was paying a tax for existing in their house. There was no thank you. There was only the expectation that I would do it again. And I did. Then there was Chloe, the entrepreneur. 2 years ago she needed $30,000 for a lifestyle brand startup. She pitched it to me over a dinner I paid for, talking about vision and market disruption. I knew the business plan was a joke. I knew she had never worked a 40-hour week in her life. But Richard and Susan cornered me. They told me I was jealous. They told me I was stifling her potential because I was a bitter corporate drone who didn't understand dreams. They wore me down until writing the check was easier than listening to the noise. That money vanished in 6 months. No product was ever launched. No receipts were ever shown. That is the trap. You think if you give enough, eventually you will fill the hole inside of them and they will finally see you. But you are not filling a hole. You are digging your own grave. I realized, sitting in the cold silence of my apartment, that I had been groomed for this. Since I was a child, I was taught that my value was transactional. Chloe was loved for being beautiful. Richard was loved for being the patriarch. I was tolerated because I was useful. I was the insurance policy they took out on themselves. But the thing about the boiling frog is that eventually, the heat gets too high, even for the most conditioned survivor. The text tonight wasn't just an insult. It was the final degree that turned the water into steam. The frog wasn't boiling anymore. The frog had just kicked over the pot. The sun rose over the Denver skyline, turning the gray snow into blinding white slush, but the storm inside my phone was just getting started. I had silenced notifications, but I could see them piling up on the lock screen like snowdrifts. 35 missed calls, 62 text messages. The first voicemail was from Chloe. I pressed play. The background noise was the soft, expensive chime of a bridal boutique. Then came her voice, shrill and vibrating with panic. You embarrassed me in front of the consultant. The card was declined, Emma. Declined. Do you know how humiliation tastes? Fix it. Now. There was no question of why I had done it. There was no concern that perhaps I had been hacked or lost my job or died. There was only the fury of a parasite that had lost its host. Next was Susan, my mother. Her voice notes were always a performance, breathless and teary. Emma, you are killing him. He is grasping his chest. I am looking at your father, and he is gray. If he has another heart attack, the blood is on your hands. Send the money for the gala tickets back. We have guests coming. Please, Emma, don't be a monster. Then Richard. He didn't call. He sent a photo. It was a close-up of his blood pressure monitor. 180/110. Underneath, he typed a single line. Look at what you are doing to this family. I sat in my kitchen with a mug of black coffee, watching the messages scroll by. I looked for a specific sequence of words. I looked for, are you okay? I looked for, what is wrong? I looked for, let's talk. But those words didn't exist in their vocabulary. To them, I wasn't a person with feelings or limits. I was an appliance. You don't ask a toaster why it stopped working. You don't ask a refrigerator if it's feeling unappreciated. You kick it, you shake it. You scream at it until it does its job. For the first time in 29 years, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I didn't feel the familiar tug of guilt in my stomach telling me to apologize and smooth things over. I felt a profound, quiet detachment. I realized I had spent my entire life making coffee for them in my head, anticipating their needs, managing their moods, warming their world before they even woke up. I took a sip of my own coffee. It was bitter and hot. I decided right then that I was done making theirs. I didn't block their numbers. That would have been an emotional reaction, a retreat. Instead, I muted the notifications and opened a new window on my browser. I treated the morning not as a family crisis but as a hostile corporate takeover. In my line of work, when a department is bleeding cash and refusing accountability, you don't argue with the managers, you audit them. I put on my coat and walked 3 blocks to the office supply store. I walked past the greeting cards and the gift wrap. I went straight to the organizational aisle. I bought a 3-inch heavy-duty binder, I chose the color red. Alert, emergency, stop. I bought a pack of reinforced dividers and a set of highlighters. When I got back to my desk, I printed everything. The printer hummed for 45 minutes straight. 10 years of bank statements, credit card histories, Venmo logs, wire transfer receipts. The paper stacked up warm and heavy. I punched holes in every sheet. I categorized them by year, then by recipient. 2018, the back surgery. 2020, the business loan. 2022, the mortgage rescue. I slotted them into the binder, the metal rings snapping shut with a sound like a jail cell locking. On the spine, I wrote 2 words in black permanent marker: Project Independence. It was a physical manifestation of my invisible labor. When it was just numbers on a screen, it felt abstract, but sitting there on my desk, 3 inches thick and weighing 4 pounds, it was undeniable. It was a monument to my own exploitation. Then I made a phone call. I called Sarah, a forensic accountant I used to work with at a previous firm. We skipped the small talk. "I need a favor," I said. "I need you to trace a specific wire transfer from 2 years ago, $30,000. It was supposed to go to a medical collection agency for a hospital in Denver." I gave her the routing number and the date. Sarah didn't ask why I was auditing my own father. She just typed, "Give me 24 hours, she said. Finally, I opened a word processor and drafted a formal document. It wasn't a letter to a sister. It was a notice of voluntary surrender regarding the SUV. I cited the lease agreement terms, the lack of payment, and the scheduled repossession date. I attached a copy of the tow truck order. I didn't sign it. Love, Emma. I signed it, Emma Miller Lassie. I printed it 3 copies, 1 for me, 1 for the glove box, and 1 for the red binder. I ran my hand over the plastic cover of the binder. For years they had told me I was crazy. They told me I was cheap. They told me I was imagining things. But facts don't imagine. Math doesn't gaslight. This binder was my shield. And tomorrow night at the gala, it was going to be my sword. 24 hours later, my phone rang. It was Sarah. I picked up on the first ring, my pen hovering over a fresh legal pad. "Tell me," I said. There was a pause on the other end, the kind of heavy, static-filled silence that usually precedes a death notification. "Emma," Sarah said, her voice stripped of its usual professional detachment. "You are sitting down, right? I'm standing. Just tell me." "Okay, the wire transfer for $30,000. The routing number didn't go to a medical collections agency. It went to a holding account for a title company in downtown Denver." The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. A title company for what? I pulled the public property records that matched the transaction date. She continued. 2 days after you wired the money to your father, a down payment of exactly $30,000 was recorded for a unit at the Glassworks. It's a luxury condo building in the London district. She took a breath. "The deed isn't in your father's name, Emma. It's in Chloe's." I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream. I felt a wave of nausea roll through my stomach, hot and acidic, but I swallowed it down. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. 2 years ago, Richard had called me weeping. He said the surgeons were threatening to send his debt to collectors. He said they would garnish his pension. He said he was terrified. I had drained my emergency fund. I had canceled my vacation. I had driven a car with no heat for a winter so I could save him. And he hadn't used a cent of it for his back. He had taken my sacrifice and used it to buy my sister a view of the mountains. "Are you sure?" I asked, though I already knew she was. "I'm looking at the digital copy of the deed right now," Sarah said. "Richard is listed as the guarantor, but Chloe is the primary owner. The down payment matches your transfer to the penny." "Send it to me," I said. "Send me everything." The email arrived 10 seconds later. I opened the attachment. There it was. The official county record. Owner Chloe Miller. Property value $600,000. I stared at her signature on the bottom line, a loopy, childish scrawl that I had paid $30,000 to authorize. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. It wasn't just toxic family dynamics. This was fraud. This was theft. He had looked me in the eye, played on my fear of his death, and robbed me to fund her lifestyle. I printed the deed. The paper was still warm from the printer as I punched 3 holes in the side. I opened the red binder to the section labeled 2020. I placed the deed directly on top of the wire transfer receipt. The evidence was complete. The nausea faded, replaced by a cold, hard resolve that felt like iron settling in my spine. They thought I was just a bitter daughter who had cut off the allowance. They had no idea I was the prosecutor who had just found the smoking gun. I didn't drive to Aspen. I didn't put on a gown, and I didn't storm the ballroom to make a scene. That would have given them exactly what they wanted, a reaction, a villain they could point to and call hysterical. Instead, I sat on my couch with a glass of cheap wine and opened my laptop. Chloe was live streaming. The feed was high-definition broadcasting to her 12,000 followers. The ballroom was bathed in gold light. There was a jazz band playing in the corner. Richard was holding court near the bar wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my first car. Susan was laughing, clutching a glass of champagne, playing the role of the benevolent matriarch. Chloe was in the center of the frame, twirling in a white dress, telling her audience how blessed she felt to be surrounded by generosity and love. It was a perfect performance. But that is the thing about power built on someone else's money, it is an illusion. It is a house of cards standing in a wind tunnel waiting for someone to open the door. And at 8:15 p.m., the door opened. A man walked into the frame. He wasn't a guest. He was a courier from a private process service dressed in a sharp dark uniform. He didn't look at the cameras. He walked straight through the crowd, parting the sea of black tie guests like a shark moving through a school of fish. He stopped in front of Richard. The jazz band faltered. Chloe stopped twirling. The comment section on the livestream started asking, "Who is that?" The courier handed Richard a heavy package. It wasn't wrapped in a bow. It was the red binder. Then he handed Chloe a tablet. I picked up my phone. I sent a single message to the family group chat. Check the tablet. Page 4, the condo down payment. On my screen, I watched the notification pop up on Chloe's phone, which she was using to live stream. She frowned, confused. She looked down at the tablet the courier had given her. At the same time, Richard opened the red binder. I saw the color drain from his face in real time. It wasn't a gradual realization. It was an instant collapse. He saw the bank statements. He saw the liquor store tracking. He saw the forensic audit of the $30,000 he stole. Susan tried to grab the binder, her smile twisting into panic. But it was Chloe's reaction that satisfied me most. She stared at the deed on the tablet, the proof that her lifestyle was funded by fraud committed against her own sister. She looked up at the camera, realizing the stream was still running. Realizing that the guests around her were whispering. Realizing that the medical debt lie was dead. This is the fragility of false status. When you build your identity on resources you do not own, you are always one audit away from bankruptcy. They looked powerful 5 minutes ago, but without my silence holding them up, they were just thieves in rented tuxedos. Chloe lunged for the phone. The live stream cut to black. The show was over. But in my apartment, the silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was the sound of a gavel coming down. The fallout wasn't loud. It was a series of quiet administrative corrections. Richard tried to call me the next morning, but he reached a disconnected line message. I had changed my number at 9 a.m. The luxury SUV was loaded onto a flatbed tow truck 3 days later. I received the confirmation email from the leasing agency while I was eating lunch. The condo in London was listed for sale by the end of the week. They had to liquidate the asset to pay back the loan I had exposed or face a fraud investigation. I sat in my apartment. My bank account was lighter by $82,000. That money was gone, burned on the altar of their entitlement. I would never get it back. But as I looked around my quiet, cold living room, I realized I had purchased something far more valuable than a condo or a gala ticket. I had bought my own life back. I opened my laptop one last time. I didn't log into their accounts. I logged into a travel site. I booked a cabin in the mountains for next weekend. Not in Aspen. Somewhere quiet, somewhere with no signal. Just me, the snow, and the silence I had finally earned. To everyone watching this, I want to speak to you directly. To the invisible children. To the fixers. To the ones who think that if you just pay one more bill, or solve one more crisis, or swallow one more insult, they will finally love you. They won't. Love is not a subscription service. You cannot buy your way into a family that is committed to misunderstanding you. The most expensive thing you will ever pay for is a relationship that costs you your dignity. I spent a decade trying to be their safety net, and they used it to strangle me. Don't wait for the thank you. It isn't coming. Close the account. Change the locks. Let the calls go to voicemail. You are not a wallet. You are a person, and you have the right to be free. If this story spoke to you, if you are the one holding the weight of your family's expectations, please share this video. Let's remind every silent ATM out there that they have the right to close the account. You are not alone.